And that was only a partial truth. The full truth is it's a nation of homicidal maniacs. He is the reflection of his nation. Now let's turn to Mr. Copernicus. Mr. Copernicus asks the question. Mr. Copernicus asks the question.
It's Conricus.
Why should we?
It's Conricus. The N is before the R. Finkelstein. A professor should be able to pronounce the name. No,
the other guest.
That's too difficult.
The other guest. The other guest says, why should we wait until Iran develops the missiles, the ballistic missiles, the delivery systems? Why should we wait? Really, China has ballistic missiles. It has nuclear-powered missiles, nuclear weapons, delivery systems for them. If you ask John Mearsheimer, who I count as a good friend, he will tell you that a conflict with China is inevitable. It's inevitable. Why should we wait? Why shouldn't we launch nuclear weapons at China? That crazy communist regime, which poses some point in the future a real threat. Why should we wait? I'm old enough to remember 1963, when China acquired nuclear weapons. And the question was, why should we wait? Communist China, Marxist-Leninists, crazy fundamentalist Marxists, why should we wait? I wonder if your other guest, I wonder if he believes it would have been a good idea for the United States to nuke China in 1963. Why should we wait?
I'll be happy to respond to that.
The whole point of the UN Charter, the whole point of the UN Charter is to take threat of war, of death and destruction, of murder and mayhem, to take it seriously and to make sure that all diplomatic options have been exhausted before you go to war. So now let's quickly look.
Answer to the question that Piers asked. Brilliant.
Okay.
He asked if Israel has the right to defend itself, and you called Israel a genocidal maniac.
Could you please have a speaker to let me speak?
Well, yeah, but I do think...
It'd be nice if you answered the question of the
debate. I did ask a question.
So now let's get to the question.
Yeah.
Number one, it's always been option to have one in Latin America, a weapons of mass destruction free zone. We have one in Africa. We have one in the South Pacific. What's one obstacle to eliminating all the weapons in the Middle East, all nuclear weapons in the East, that option? All the other Middle Eastern states have gone along with it. Only one state, the one who pretends to be for peace and for security, opposed the weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. That's Israel. Iran is a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Is Israel a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty? In fact,
Piers, is he going to answer questions or just freewheel all day long? I answer your questions. I don't sit here and just pontificate. You ask me a question, I answer it. Is this going to carry on all
well, yeah,
night?
I do think, Norman, that, I did just ask a simple question: Is Israel not entitled to defend itself from Iran?
Israel has the right to defend itself under Article 51 of the UN Charter if it faces an imminent, irreversible threat to its national sovereignty. You can't invoke a future possibility sometime into the future as grounds for launching a war.
It is
for launching a war.
It's present and past. It's not future. It's present and past. Really, I have to intervene here because you're saying so many things.
Mr. Cornicus.
Yeah, you're saying so many things that are ridiculous.
Well, we should be able to get people's names right. So his name is Jonathan Conricus. Let's please use the right names.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, Jonathan, if it's too difficult, Professor Finkelstein. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
you don't have right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, listen, it's a really clear case, very basic situation. From an Israeli perspective, we are under threat. We are at the receiving end of the Iranian peril. If ever was a justification for a sovereign country to action against an aggressive, hostile nation state, then Israel again debate the U.S. perspective on it, and we can debate. I think that it's very smart to take care of an enemy that says that he wants to destroy you, just doesn't have the real capability to do so yet. I think it's exactly the right thing to take care of that enemy and make sure that they don't have the means to fulfill their dreams of destroying or even threatening to destroy you. And weapons of mass destruction in the hands of religious and ayatollahs and people who dream about, a Muslim caliphate and who govern their own country by oppression, who murder people on the streets, who hang gay people from cranes, and who oppress everybody who doesn't conform. I mean, nuclear weapons are horrible everywhere. They can be potentially horrible everywhere, but in the hands of people who have zero morals, zero respect for life, that's the worst place for them to be. And frankly, sir, I don't think that the example of China is relevant. It could have been relevant in the 50s, and maybe then that could have been a smart thing. But I don't know, and I don't think it's really relevant today. What is relevant today is that Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons program, and they were trying to build bombs, and they were enriching uranium. They were hiding their nuclear weapons program. They were trying to international agency. They got wind of it, but the U.S. exposed it. Europeans, who are, I don't think you can blame them for being action prone or wanting to be belligerent, but they actually saw and understood the threat, and they said, okay, let's deal with it in terms of sanctions. And they applied sanctions on the Iranian regime in order to give it an opportunity to course correct.
Okay, but Jonathan, you're talking there about need Iran to be transparent and open and honest about its nuclear capability, about its nuclear aspirations. And yet, of course, the one country in the world which resolutely refuses to be remotely transparent about its nuclear capability is Israel. I've asked Netanyahu directly many times, the former prime minister last week. Nobody ever wants to give a straight answer. So let me just ask you. You say you answer my questions. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? Yes or no?
Listen, as far as I know, and as you know, not the prime minister, not even close to it, way off the grid. But as far as I understand, Israel does possess significant capabilities. But officially, Israel says it maintains this policy of ambiguity.
Why?
I think at this, I think at this stage, the organizations, enemies, and people who need to know, they know. And I'm specifically focusing on our enemies. And
yeah, but you understand why people like me look at it and go, hang on a sec. So you guys are all over Iran about their nuclear capability, and you want to have full transparency. You don't want anyone misleading anybody. And yet when it comes to your own nuclear weapons, you know, you're about the first Israeli guest I've ever had, I think, who's openly said, yeah, we've got them. But the idea that your government can just not answer that question and is the only country in the world that doesn't give an answer to that question, why does Israel get a pass? I don't understand it.
Well, I think it's fundamentally different when you try to compare Iran and Israel. We aren't the ones.
Well, let me
who are
compare you to
screaming
the UK. Why should the UK be open and transparent about its nuclear capability, but Israel get a pass? I don't understand why there's one rule for Israel and another rule for everybody else has got them.
But even more substantially, Piers, why should anybody have nuclear weapons? Why does the UK have them? For what purpose? What does it serve France? What does it serve Russia, China, the US?
Well, obviously they have
Pakistan.
them as a deterrent, as I assume Israel does. But again,
there you go.
The French are open about it. The British are open about it. The Americans are open about it. The only country that isn't is Israel.
Yeah, but I mean, what's more important, whether you have it or not, or whether you speak about it? I mean, I think it's something that, frankly, it's one of those Israeli policies that I actually don't understand myself. I've questioned it a few times and sought answers to really understand the reason behind it. The way I analyze it is that it was a policy or a principle that was formulated many, many years ago, maybe in the 60s. And at the time, it served a purpose while capabilities were being generated. And then it probably just carried on with inertia. And maybe a future prime minister of Israel will say, you know what, world, yes, we have them, we're armed with them, and we can use them in order to defend ourselves against an existential threat.
I think that would be an excellent idea if Israel was just
honest. I personally would support it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I personally would support it. But I mean, would that change the situation, the calculus regarding a crazy religious fundamental
I don't think it changes.
Like Iran?
I just think if you're going to lecture other countries about being transparent about their nuclear capability and aspirations, you've got to be yourself. Otherwise, you're a hypocrite.
No, I mean, my issue with Iran is that they try to destroy the state of Israel. They openly say that their national goal is to annihilate us.
Yeah, I'm not quibbling with that.
It's not so much about transparency.
I'm not questioning
about the fact that they want to kill us all.
I understand. But I've got to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed for the debate. I appreciate it. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent.
This game, you're not ready for it.
Well, good morning. Yesterday at Dover Air Force Base, President Trump, the chairman, and I stood in solemn silence as heroes came home. Flag-draped caskets, we honored them. We grieved with their families, and we listened. What I heard through tears, through hugs, through strength, and through unbreakable resolve was the same from family after family. They said, finish this. Honor their sacrifice. Do not waver. Do not stop until the job is done. My response, along with that of the president, was simple. Of course, we will finish this. We will honor their sacrifice. Their sacrifice only steals our commitment. I wear this bracelet. Staff Sergeant Jorge Oliveira, he was one of my sergeants or one of my specialists in Guantanamo Bay. He deployed later to Afghanistan, where he was killed on 19 October 2011. Killed 10 years after 9/11, 15 years ago. He was one of the 1%, the best of America. Not just a guardsman, but a law enforcement officer back home and a family man. I remember him every day, just like so many other men and women of our generation and previous generations who wear bracelets like this. Just as we will always remember those lost in this conflict. Their names are now etched into our mission and into the soul of a grateful nation. I stand here today speaking to you, the American people, not through filters, not through reporters, not through cable news spin. A dishonest and anti-Trump press will stop at nothing. We know this at this point. To downplay progress, amplify every cost, and call into question every step. Sadly, TDS is in their DNA. They want President Trump to fail. But you, the American people, know better. Yes, there are reporters in front of me, but they are not our audience today. It's you, the good, decent, patriotic American people. You, the hardworking, tax-paying, God-fearing American patriots. The media here, not all of it, but much of it, wants you to think, just 19 days into this conflict, that we're somehow spinning toward an endless abyss or a forever war or a quagmire. Nothing could be further from the truth. Hear it from me, one of hundreds of thousands who fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, who watched previous foolish politicians like Bush, Obama, and Biden squander American credibility. This is not those wars. President Trump knows better. Epic Fury is different. It's laser focused. It's decisive. Our objectives, given directly from our America First president, remain exactly what they were on day one. These are not the media's objectives, not Iran's objectives, not new objectives, our objectives, unchanged, on target, and on plan. Destroy missiles, launchers, and Iran's defense industrial base so they cannot rebuild, destroy their navy, and Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Our objectives from day one. To the patriotic members of the press, nobody can deliver perfection in wartime. This building knows that more than anyone. But report the reality. We're winning decisively and on our terms. Iran is a vast country, and just like Hamas and their tunnels, they've poured any aid, any economic development, humanitarian aid into tunnels and rockets. That's what they did with Hamas. Iran has funneled decades of state resources, not to their people, but into missiles and drones and proxies and buried facilities. But we are hunting them down methodically, ruthlessly, and overwhelmingly, like no other military in the world can do. And the results speak for themselves. To date, we've struck over 7,000 targets across Iran and its military infrastructure. That is not incremental. That is overwhelming force applied with precision. And again, today will be the largest strike package yet, just like yesterday was. As I've said from day one, our capabilities continue to build. Iran's continue to degrade. We're hunting and striking death and destruction from above. Iran's air defenses flattened. Iran's defense industrial base, the factories, the production lines that feed their missile and drone programs, being overwhelmingly destroyed. We've hit hundreds of their defense industrial bases directly. Their ability to manufacture new ballistic missiles has probably taken the hardest hit of all. Ballistic missile attacks against our forces, down 90% since the start of the conflict. Same with one-way attack UAVs. Think kamikaze drones, down 90%. Now, the Iranians will still shoot, we know that, but they would shoot a lot more if they could, but they can't. The last job anyone in the world wants right now? Senior leader for the IRGC or Besiege. Temp jobs, all of them. And to borrow a page from Admiral Ernest King in World War II, we've decided to share the ocean with Iran. We've given them the bottom half. We've damaged or sunk over 120 of their Navy ships, with battle damage assessments pending for many more. See, oftentimes we have to wait a few days on battle damage assessment to get the real number. Their surface fleet is no longer a factor. Their submarines, they once had 11, are gone. Their military ports are crippled. Iran has terrorized the United States and our interests for 47 years. Their core industries, not steel or agriculture, or tourism, their core industries are state-sponsored terrorism, proxy militias, underground networks, ballistic missiles, and a violent, messianic, Islamist ideology chasing some sort of apocalyptic endgame. A regime like that, refusing to abandon its nuclear ambitions, is not just a regional problem. It's a direct threat to America, to freedom, and to civilization. The world, the Middle East, our ungrateful allies in Europe, even segments of our own press should be saying one thing to President Trump. Thank you. Thank you for the courage to stop this terror state from holding the world hostage with missiles while building or attempting to build a nuclear bomb. Thank you for doing the work of the free world. Yesterday's ceremony reminded us why we fight. Not for nation building or democracy promotion, but to crush direct threats to America, Americans, and our interests. We fight to win, and we are winning on our terms, following our objectives. My 13-year-old son popped into my office last night while I was editing these remarks. He asked about the war and the families I met at Dover. And I looked at him and I said, they died for you, son, so that your generation doesn't have to deal with a nuclear Iran. It's the truth. And they did. So to the families who said, finish this, we will. And I say the same to every American who wants peace through strength. May Almighty God continue to bless our troops in this fight. And again, to the American people, please pray for them every day, on bended knee, with your family, in your schools, in your churches, in the name of Jesus Christ. To the troops, keep going, and Godspeed. Over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you all for being here. I also had the honor yesterday, as the Secretary said, of traveling up to Dover with the President to welcome home our six fallen. It was an honor and a privilege for me to be there and to say thank you to their families. And I want to mention their names this morning. From the 6th Aerial Refueling Wing out of MacDill Air Force Base, Florida, but stationed as part of an active associate unit at Birmingham, Alabama, Major Alex Klenner, John Alex Klenner, Major Ariana Sabino. She was posthumously promoted from captain to major, and Technical Sergeant Ashley Pruitt, the boom operator on that crew. From the 121st Aerial Fueling Ring, Ohio Air National Guard out of Rickenbacker Air National Guard Base in Columbus, Ohio, Captain Seth Koval, Captain Curtis Anks, and now Master Sergeant Tyler Simmons, who was also promoted in the boom operator on that crew. To a person and every family member I spoke with yesterday, they all shared that their family members loved serving. They loved being part of a great team and a crew, and they loved airplanes and aviation. Our nation's tanker crews really are unsung heroes, incredible warriors who put their lives on the line so we can continue to take the fight to an enemy. I've personally witnessed their courage and tenacity many times, from the morning of September 11th, where they answered my call for some help, to the skies over foreign countries where they've come forward out of their safe tanker track to give me gas when I simply could not leave a ground force that was engaged in a firefight. They've answered the call and come forward time and time and time again. I'm filled with incredible pride and gratitude for all that the tanker crews do, our pilots, our boom operators, and the maintainers. And to the families of our six fallen, know that we share your grief. Our nation will never forget their sacrifice, and we will never forget their names. Our entire joint force mourns with you today. and will continue to remember their incredible gift of a great example for all of us. Now, let me turn to an operations update. U.S. CENTCOM remains on plan to achieve our military objectives and remain unrelenting in our pursuit of Iranian missile capabilities, UAV capabilities, and their Navy, and as the Secretary said, their industrial base. Each day, we continue to attack deeper into Iranian territory. As reported by U.S. Central Command yesterday, the U.S. military dropped 5,000-pound penetrator weapons into underground storage facilities, storing coastal defense cruise missiles and other support equipment. These weapons are bespokely designed to get through concrete and/or rocks and function after penetrating those barriers. We continue to hunt and kill mine storage facilities and naval ammunition depots. We continue to hunt and kill afloat assets, including more than 120 vessels and 44 mine layers, and the pressure will continue. We're flying further to the east now and penetrating deeper into Iranian airspace to hunt and kill one-way attack garrisons, destroying Iran's ability to project power outside of its borders. The A-10 Warthog is now in the fight across the southern flank and is hunting and killing fast attack watercraft in the Straits of Hormuz. In addition, AH-64 Apaches have joined the fight on the southern flank, and they continue to work on the southern side, and that includes some of our allies who are using Apaches to handle one-way attack drones. In Iraq, AH-64s have been striking against Iranian-aligned militia groups to make sure that we suppress any threat in Iraq against U.S. forces or U.S. interests. And we remain focused on pursuit of any platform that Iran could field to harm Americans or our partners. Last Friday, Admiral Cooper and the CENTCOM team conducted precision strikes against more than 90 targets on Karg Island, which included all of their military-only infrastructure, which included air defenses, naval base, mine storage, and deployment facilities. And as the Secretary mentioned, we continue to strike against Iran's defense industrial base and will continue to do so. Today, I want to continue my theme of talking about members of our incredible joint force. Today, I want to talk about some exceptional airmen who are engaged in the fight daily. United States Air Force, Air Force Reserve, and Air National Guard crews within our bomber force. The B-1s, B-2s, and B-52s, and the airmen on the ground who maintain and load these weapon systems. They are the backbone of America's long-range strike capability, and their contributions to Epic Fury have been decisive. Assigned to STRATCOM under Admiral Rich Correll and supported by TRANSCOM, the tanker force that we've talked about, under the command of General Randall Reed, every mission is designed to achieve overwhelming outcomes on behalf of the United States and our allies. Last weekend, I had the chance to go out and see some of our deployed bomber forces, the B-1 and B-52 crews, and I had a chance to sit down with some young aviators and maintainers and ask them, how do you feel? Tell me about your typical day. And these are crews comprised of between 2 and 5 airmen, 2 on the B-2s, 5 on the B-52s, and 4 in the B-1s out there. Some of these Americans are in their early or mid-20s, and we give them the gift of this incredible responsibility, hundreds of thousands of pounds of aircraft, and they take off and go do our work as required. Their mission actually begins the day prior when they're given a target or a bunch of targets, and they begin to study those targets, look at what are the effects required, what are the weapons required to get there, how will we program these weapons, what is the weather, what is the tanker flow. It's an incredibly complex problem that we give each and every one of these crews, and they work it over the period of 24 hours prior, get some rest, and then step out the door to go fly. The last thing they do is they check all of their equipment, their oxygen mask, survival gear, load pistols, and get ready to go. They crank the jets about an hour prior to takeoff and then launch into the daylight, doing their pre-flight checks, and as the kids say, lock in and prepare to go to war, sometimes on a long and stressful journey. During the flight, they're surrounded by technology and capabilities, and they'll do multiple air aerial refueling efforts across tankers on the way to the AOR, area of responsibility, either coming from the States or coming from a forward deployed basing. And I will tell you, as a fighter pilot, getting gas is a lot easier in an F-16 than it is in a B-1, B-2, or a B-52, where you are handling this airplane. It is a physical thing, unlike a fighter that's a lot easier. And they stay on that boom for sometimes up to 30 minutes, taking hundreds of thousands of pounds of gas. It is a physical, demanding thing to take gas, and they do it multiple times on the way there, and they do it multiple times on the way home. As they enter the operating area, they bring the entirety of America's joint force together to go do the things that we've tasked them to do, to put bombs on time, on target, with the proper effects. And I know they're feeling a range of emotions, but the thing the American people should take away from it is they're filled with a focus that is incredibly impressive. And they have fear, of course, but their bigger fear is, dear God, please don't let me screw this up. The warrior's prayer that we all have in our souls. In the days of epic fury, they were shooting, as we've talked about in this room, a lot of standoff weapons. Now we've switched and rolled, as I mentioned last week, to stand-in weapons. And behind each and every one of them are incredible maintainers and weapons builders who go out there and make sure these aircraft and their weapon systems are ready to go. These airplanes are so big that they're not in hangars. They're out in the cold, out in the snow, out in the rain. The bombs are being built outside in 365. It's not comfortable work, but when you go spend just a minute with these incredibly young Americans who are so motivated, you cannot come away from that exchange not being hopeful for America's future. It is simply awesome. And we hand these Americans, young Americans, incredible and weighty responsibility, and they deliver every single time, quietly, with professionalism and humility, doing the things that we ask them to do. In conclusion, we will continue major combat operations. As the Secretary said, we continue to get busier. I know the Secretary and I share that we're incredibly proud of 2.8 million members of our joint force. I am personally, and we are personally grateful for the tenacity and professionalism of the brave men and women who serve inside STRATCOM, CENTCOM, SPACECOM, CYBERCOM, TRANSCOM, and the rest of the joint force. And I'll close where I started. I ask today that we remember those 6 fallen that came home. They represent the best of our nation. For those families that are feeling the pain, know that we are with you and will remain with you. May we always prove worthy of their sacrifice. And I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take a couple questions.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the updated degradation in strike target numbers you laid out, how close would you say are towards achieving the president's objectives, and what is the end game of the operation without divulging any sensitive battle plans?
Well, we wouldn't want a definitive time frame on that, but as we've said, we're on plan. So we're looking at those metrics very closely, relaying that to the president and the national security team, but feel confident that as, again, we're more stand-in means we're over the top, even further in, and we have even more of an exact sense of what we're striking and why, and even more dynamically, meaning because the intelligence improved, we're able to more quickly identify targets. And let's say they come out of an underground facility where they've been hiding and able to strike it before it strikes or right after it shoots. But we're very much on plan, and that's why I want to speak to the American people here. You hear a lot of noise about widening or new missions or speculation about what we should or should not be doing. This is a clear set of objectives. The president has given us every capability we need to accomplish that. We've got the best in the world in uniform executing it on the ground. They believe in and are invested in this mission. And it will be at the president's choosing, ultimately, where we say, hey, we've achieved what we need to on behalf of the American people to ensure our security. So no time set on that, but we're very much on track. Absolutely. Yes, right here.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. David Zier, Real America's Voice News. What countries have been the most cooperative with us, including the Gulf states, as Europe hedges? And I also wanted to ask you, the internet blackouts by the regime, it's been shut down for weeks. Is the U.S. military playing a role in, fighting against the regime, blocking VPN networks and satellites and other things? Is there a role for the U.S. military there?
Obviously, on the allies and partners side, Israel from day one has been an incredible and capable partner, willing and able. There's nothing like capabilities and partners that are able to use them. The Gulf states have stepped up incredibly. In fact, Iran's sort of reckless attempt to strike civilian infrastructure and other things has brought countries who maybe would have not been as all in as they are today squarely into our orbit. And we're proud to be defending with them, standing with them, you name it. UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and others who have been right there. And we're grateful for that kind of support. As far as the internet, we're watching the regime try to tighten its grip as much as possible. And we're obviously taking countermeasures, many of which we can't talk about here, to ensure that messaging is delivered, not just to the Iranian people writ large, but to the right audiences, certain audiences that need to hear certain things about what their fate might look like or what their choices are. So even though that regime is trying really hard to ensure the world can't see, right? They want to put out fake AI-generated images, which, by the way, sometimes our press happens to fall for, like the Abraham Lincoln on fire and turning around. These AI-generated images are meant to make it look like something's happening when the exact opposite is. So they make up fake reports and fake images to lie to their own people to try to make it. But even then, their own people can barely receive a lot of those messages and communicate because of the blackout that they've imposed upon them. But we work around that for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General, overnight, Iran launched missiles across the Gulf. They managed to hit the Saudi oil refinery on the Red Sea. What does it mean that they have that capability now, 3 weeks into the war? And Mr. Secretary, you mentioned civilian infrastructure. Iran seems to be treating U.S. diplomatic outposts, embassies, consulates like they are legitimate hard targets in the region now. What is the Pentagon doing to, I guess, secure those assets, stop those attacks?
Absolutely.
Thanks for the question on the missile strikes. You know, as we said and have always said clearly, they came into this fight with a lot of weapons. This is why we continue to be as aggressive and assertive as we can against their ballistic missile capability, both their medium-range ballistic missile capability and their short-range missile capability. So we are continuing to hunt and find them and kill them, and we will continue to do so. So they still retain some capability. And we have layered defenses throughout the region that will allow us to protect those. And we're working with our partners across the Gulf region to help them improve any defensive capabilities that they may need.
To that point on capabilities, you know, Iran's an energy-rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. And that's why you had millions of Iranians protesting. It's because they felt like their quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be. And what was the Iranian state? There's a reason we call Iran the number one state sponsor of terrorism, because they took the money they make and they invested in tunnels and they did missiles and they did launchers and UAVs, and we are destroying, grading in which is we're fighting every continue to compel. And you mentioned embassies and consulates. Unlike previous administrations, we are doubling and tripling down on ensuring that our people, regardless of their Department of War, Department of State, whatever they do, are secure in those facilities. And the best defense is a good offense. And so we're not afraid to go after and kill anybody, and we have a lot of them attempting to target our diplomatic facilities. Iran, you know, we're not surprised that they would indiscriminately target, and we're still seeing that. Jerry.
As part of the justification for the war against Iran, the White House has laid out in fairly comprehensive fashion that the Iranian regime's 47 years of terrorism aimed at the U.S., including pointing to the IRGC's provision of weapons and EFPs to help kill Americans in Iraq. The Pentagon in 2019 assessed Iran was responsible for the deaths of at least 603 service members in Iraq, but there hasn't been a similar accounting, public accounting by Iran's role helping the Taliban in Afghanistan. and that also hasn't been part of the White House's public argument. I was wondering if you could speak to Iran's role in helping the Taliban during the war in Afghanistan. And Chairman, as you and the Secretary eloquently spoke about, 13 U.S. service members have been killed so far during Operation Epic Fury. I was wondering what lessons have been learned from those deaths, both from Iranian strikes, from an aircraft refueling accident. How are those lessons being applied to the current conflict? And how are those lessons going to be applied to a potential conflict in Indo-PACOM?
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. And it's true. In a town that can have a very short memory, President Trump does not. He remembers what this Iranian regime was founded on, what their declaration has been from the beginning: death to America, death to Israel. They've stated that. They've intended to, in every way, try to accomplish that, killing Americans in any theater they can, embassies for quite a long time. In Iraq, that was the deadliest weapon, was the EFP, the explosively formed penetrator. I was there when that tactic and technique started to emerge, and the realization was it wasn't just jihadis putting together 155 rounds daisy chained. It was an entire state, a country with its apparatus able to mold steel in a way that was specifically designed to penetrate American armor and kill Americans. This was not, maybe we send them a couple of thoughts about how to build a bomb. This was Iran specifically passing technology and wherewithal and personnel into Iraq to kill Americans specifically. I know the number is said to be 600. A lot of us think it's higher than that, given the amount of capability they brought in. So they have been at war with us, whether we acknowledge it or not, for 47 years. The same goes in Afghanistan. Name the Islamist enemy, whether they Sunni ordered them, as long as that group is willing to try to kill Americans. So the enemy of their enemy has been their friend as well in the Islamist world. So Iran, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's around the world, has been targeting Americans. And what they wanted in this context, and what President Trump would not tolerate, is a regime of that nature being closer and closer to nuclear capabilities, a capability they would have said they would want to use, and we ought believe what our enemies say they would do if they got the most dangerous weapon in the world. So it's been across every theater that Iran's been a threat to America, and sometimes we have to remind folks of that, but thank goodness we have a commander-in-chief who, on behalf of this country, has internalized that and said, hey, we're going to do something about it.
Jerry, I do want to talk about the lessons learned question because it's important to me. I won't share particular tactical lessons, and the KC-135 incident is under investigation. But I do want to talk about how I think about this and how we think about it. And this is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I believe the Joint Force has to be a very fast learning organization. Early, often, and always. And so in each case, both at the strategic, operational, and tactical level, we've charged the Joint Force to look at themselves and say, what was our plan? Well, first, did we have a plan? Yes or no? The answer is always yes, because we plan for literally everything. Did we execute our plan? Yes or no? If we did it work? If not, why not? If we didn't execute our plan but did something better, what's the lesson learned associated with that? And then how do we quickly capture those lessons after every loss or every engagement and quickly adopt those lessons and then share them across the entirety of the Joint Force? And inside the Joint Staff, we've tasked our J7 Directorate under the lead of Lieutenant General Lazewski, a United States Marine, to be extremely entrepreneurial in harvesting and capturing those lessons in a proactive and not reactive way. In fact, we've got teammates from the J7 who are now spread out across the CENTCOM theater, both here in the States and forward, to ensure that in every opportunity, we do not miss a chance to grab that lesson and quickly accelerate it into the practice that we adopt inside the Joint Force, so that if there's a loss or if there's something that we can learn from, that we learn it not only in the CENTCOM AOR, but we adapt it across all of the combatant commands, not just INDOPACOM. And it's across all of the warfighting functions. I've asked them to look rigorously, to check our egos at the door, to remember this is about what's right, not who's right, and to be clinical around the way we look at lessons learned, because we owe it to the force to do that. Thanks for that question.
Absolutely. Brown check at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Jonathan Dre with Roca Politics. As you said, at the end of this war, Iran will be without a missile or drone capability, a navy, or the ability to make nuclear weapons. Since the largest threat and sponsor of terror in the region will be incapacitated, are there plans to move assets and troops out of the Middle East? I guess in a perfect world, a year after the war has ended, what does the military presence in the Middle East look like compared to before the war?
Well, I appreciate the question. I do think when you address a real threat head on, it creates new options on the other side, right? I think what President Trump refuses to do, which too often this town does, is just sit in the status quo. Oh, nobody can do about that. They've got too much capability. What if this happens? What if that happens? He instead says, what's in the interest of the American people? It's going to take some courage. It's going to take some capabilities. We're going to have to gather some forces there in order to do it. We're not going to tell people how many or how long or what we're willing to do or what we're not willing to do. But if you do that and do that decisively, then out the other end is a recognition that it opens the aperture of what's possible. I mean, President Trump did the same thing in creating an opportunity for the Abraham Accords. Now you've got a situation where a lot of those countries are coming alongside us, recognizing the threat of Iran. So I think our posture in the future will be based first and foremost on our own national security, power projection, the ability to defend our people and our interests. But no doubt, working alongside our partners, the president will look at what makes the most sense going forward. I appreciate that question. Yes, right here.
War crime, is that the policy of the U.S. military now?
Thank you, Secretary Hexa. Two questions for you. The Vice President has often emphasized that the goal of this war is to denuclearize Iran while also avoiding a larger quagmire. I know that you touched on this. I'd like you to expand on how do you do that? How do you denuclearize the country while also avoiding this, forever war? And then there was a report last night that the Pentagon asked the White House for $200 billion for Iran war supplemental. Can you confirm this, and can you explain why a package this large is necessary?
Well, first of all, none of this would have been possible without Midnight Hammer, without that audacious mission with very clear goals that did obliterate their ability to enrich and the capabilities they have in those facilities. So it created the conditions for Iran to step forward and say, okay, you can reach out and touch us like that in our nuclear ambitions. You can see that we're still trying to do this. Let's make a deal. And President Trump put our two best folks on it, Steve and Jared, and they worked diligently, earnestly. I watched it to try to pursue that deal. And ultimately, I think the whole time Iran sort of said, well, we'll talk as we build more missiles and as we build more UAVs and we create this conventional umbrella so that if we chose to, we could try to reconstitute the program. And sort of naively thinking that President Trump wouldn't do something about it. And that's why, as Secretary Rubio has said, and I've said, it's the conventional umbrella that was growing and growing and growing that was meant to protect that nuclear capability. So you had to address both what happened with Midnight Hammer and what happened with that as well. As far as $200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future, ensure that our ammunition everything's refilled, and not just refilled, but above and beyond. I mean, President Trump, as he said, rebuilt the military in his first term, didn't think he'd use it as dynamically in his second, but he had. So thank goodness he did that. And an investment like this is meant to say, hey, we'll replace anything that was spent. And now that we're reviving our defense industrial base and rebuilding the arsenal of freedom and cutting deals like our great deputy secretaries here is doing, long lead times on exquisite munitions, we're going to be refilled faster than anyone imagined. And I think, we're also still dealing with the environment that Joe Biden created, which was depleting those stockholds and not sending them to our own military, but to Ukraine, which is every time we reach back and look at any sort of a challenge we have, it goes back to, well, send it to Ukraine. Ultimately, we think this should be these munitions are better spent in our own interests at this point. And this kind of funding bill is going to ensure that we're properly funded going forward. We'll take one more right here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jordan Conradson with the Gateway Pundit. So with the strike yesterday on South Pars gas field, if the U.S. didn't know about it or didn't approve of it, it kind of seems like a trend of Israel apparently pursuing their own objectives over U.S. objectives. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but the president has said he doesn't want to hit Iran's oil infrastructure right now. As you said, the U.S. avoided this on Park Island. Oil's nearing $120. Why are we helping Israel prosecute this war if they're going to pursue their own objectives?
We hold the cards. We have objectives. Those objectives are clear. We have allies pursuing objectives as well. And the truth speaks for itself. I mean, President Trump was very clear about that. Iran has weaponized energy for decades. Israel clearly sent a warning, and POTUS has made it clear, very clear. Iran knows when you hit Karg Island and you hit military capabilities on Karg Island, which is the only thing we hit, we can hold anything at issue, anything. The United States military controls the fate of that country. Iran has the ability to make the right choices. It should not, going forward, target
the Congress, not one man, should consider if it is wise to allow the Russians to sell their oil to India so that they have millions of dollars with which to kill the Ukrainians that we are now begging for help to defend ourselves against Iranian drones. Finally, had the administration chosen to abide by the Constitution, Congress might have considered the answer to General Petraeus's all-important question. Tell me how this ends. When the Iranian Navy is sunk and the missile launchers are destroyed and we have re-obliterated the nuclear infrastructure, do we declare victory and sail away? How do we feel about a new supreme leader who is more extreme and vicious and dedicated to the development of a nuclear weapon than the last one? Do we do a deal with him? How do we get him to open the Strait of Hormuz? Do we bomb more? And if we sail away and declare victory, are we back there 9 months from now to resink a rebuilt Navy and rebomb rebuilt missile launchers? Is this going to be an every 9-month thing, or is it going to be annual? The very core purpose of the intelligence community is to answer these questions for the president, for us, and for the American people. Right now, as we watch the dignified transfer of lost American patriots at Dover, as we watch gasoline approach $5 a gallon, as we watch our allies mocking us on the world stage, we need to know. Were those questions asked? How did you answer them for the President of the United States? And did he listen? I understand that the administration may come to the Congress to ask for funding of $200 billion for this war. As you answered those questions for us today, I'd ask you to remember that old saying, if you want me there for the landing, make sure I'm there at the takeoff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for his comments. Before I turn to Director Gabbard, I would like to Hartman for nearly 4 decades of service. I know you're retiring, I think, tomorrow. You are here. I just applaud your service to this nation and your leadership at the NSA, and thank you and wish you all the best in your retirement.
Thank you, Chairman. I think tomorrow as well.
All right. Thank you. Director Gabbard, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Crawford, Ranking Member Himes, members. I'm here today to present the 2026 Annual Threat Assessment and joined by my colleagues, the directors of the CIA, the DIA, FBI, and NSA. This briefing is being provided in accordance with ODNI's statutory responsibility. What I'm briefing here today does not represent my personal views or opinions, but rather the assessments of the intelligence community of the threats that facing the United States, our homeland, and our interests. In this assessment, we're following the structure of priorities that were laid out in the President's national security strategy, starting with threats to our homeland, then shifting to global risks. The defense of our homeland is of the utmost importance to the American people, and efforts by this administration over the last year to bolster homeland defense have yielded significantly positive results. For example, the strict enforcement of U.S. policies at the U.S.-Mexico border and regionally have served as a deterrent and drastically reduced illegal immigration. Based on Customs and Border Patrol data, January 2026's monthly encounters are down 83.8% compared to January of 2025. The drivers of migration are likely to continue. Potential worsening instability in countries like Cuba and Haiti risk triggering migration surges. Smugglers who often operate as transnational criminal organizations view chaos as an opportunity for profit and will likely continue to profit from these illegal immigration flows. These TCOs continue to pose a daily and direct threat to the health and safety of millions of U.S. citizens, primarily by producing and trafficking in illegal drugs. Under President Trump's leadership, fentanyl overdose deaths have seen a 30% decrease from September of 2024 to September of 2025. His aggressive efforts to more directly and actively target these transnational criminal organizations and reduce the inflow of fentanyl precursors has already had a significant impact, which is likely to continue. Mexico-based transnational criminal organizations like the Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel dominate the production and smuggling of fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine into the United States. Colombia-based TCOs and illegal armed groups like the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia and the National Liberation Army are responsible for producing and trafficking large volumes of cocaine into the U.S. and European markets, with some indicators that they are now attempting to expand to the Asia-Pacific region. Criminal groups have expanded their trafficking relationships with neighboring Ecuadorian and Brazilian gangs. MS-13 is well established in cells in the United States and uses violence to intimidate the Salvadoran diaspora, engaging in murder, extortion, retail drug trafficking, firearms offenses, and prostitution, fueling increased violence and instability. These and other TCOs present a very tangible and individualized risk of violent crime to everyday Americans and contribute to regional instability. As the president increases counter-drug and counter-cartel pressures, they're likely to seek ways to try to adapt their operations, including shifting and decentralizing production locations and trafficking routes and methods. The United States continues to face a complex and evolving threat landscape with a geographically diverse set of Islamist terrorist actors seeking to propagate their ideology globally, Americans. Even as Al-Qaeda and ISIS organizationally remain weaker today than they were at their respective peaks. The spread of Islamist ideology and is led by individuals and organizations associated with the Muslim Brotherhood pose a fundamental threat to freedom and foundational principles that underpin Western civilization. These Islamist groups and individuals use this ideology for recruiting and financial support for terrorist groups and individuals around the world, and to advance their political objectives of establishing an Islamist caliphate which governs based on Sharia. There are increasing examples of this in various European countries. President Trump's designation of certain chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organizations is a mechanism to secure Americans against this threat. In response to setbacks of their capabilities of conducting large-scale complex attacks, the IC assesses that Islamist terrorist groups have shifted towards focusing on executing information operations to spread propaganda and inspire or enable individuals located in or with access to the West. U.S. counterterrorism operations are ongoing, primarily in Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, and Syria, and have removed key terrorist leaders and operatives, degrading the ability of al-Qaeda and ISIS to quickly reconstitute its leadership and launch large-scale attacks against the homeland. Strict U.S. border enforcement measures and increased deportations of individuals with suspected links to Islamist terrorists have reduced access to the homeland and removed some potential sources of future terror attacks. Since January, U.S. officials have only had a handful of encounters at our borders with individuals associated with terrorist groups. This is a positive trend. However, our interagency coordinated efforts to identify, locate, and remove known or suspected terrorists who are already in the U.S. continues with vigilance. In 2025, there were at least 3 Islamist terrorist attacks in the U.S. Law enforcement disrupted at least 15 U.S.-based Islamist terrorist plotters. Roughly half of last year's disrupted plotters had some online contact with Islamist terrorists inspired by Islamist foreign terrorist organizations abroad. Al-Qaeda and ISIS pose the biggest threat to U.S. interests overseas in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, where these groups operate. In the Middle East, AQAP in Yemen, ISIS-K in South Asia, and ISIS in Syria are among the most likely groups conducting external plotting. ISIS in Syria specifically is likely seeking to rebuild its ranks, expand support networks, and solicit funds by re-engaging with and recruiting from the likely hundreds of ISIS detainees and thousands of ISIS-linked women and children who escaped or were released from prisons and displaced persons camps. Meanwhile, state actors present a risk broader in scope by seeking new capabilities in kinetic and cyber warfare. The U.S. secure nuclear deterrent continues to ensure safety in the homeland against strategic threats. However, the IC assesses that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and Pakistan have been researching and developing an array of novel, advanced, or traditional missile delivery systems with nuclear and conventional payloads that put our homeland within range. The IC assesses that threats to the homeland will expand collectively to more than 16,000 missiles by 2035 from the current assessed figure, or developing advanced delivery systems meant to be capable of penetrating or bypassing U.S. missile defenses. North Korea's ICBMs can already reach U.S. soil. The IC assesses that it is committed to expanding a nuclear arsenal. Pakistan's long-range ballistic missile development potentially could include ICBMs with range capable of striking the homeland. The IC assesses that Iran has previously demonstrated space launch and other technology it could use to begin to develop a militarily viable ICBM before 2035, should Tehran attempt to pursue the capability. However, these assessments will be observed and updated as the full impact of Operation Epic Fury's devastating strikes on Iran's missile production facilities, stockpiles, and launch capabilities is determined. Shifting to the cyber domain, the IC assesses that China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and non-state ransomware groups will continue to seek to compromise U.S. government and private sector networks, as well as critical infrastructure, to collect intelligence and create options for future disruption and for financial gain. The IC assesses China and Russia present the most persistent and active threats and are continuing R&D efforts. North Korea's cyber program is sophisticated and agile. In 2025 alone, North Korea's cryptocurrency heist probably stole $2 billion, which is helping to fund the regime, including further development of its strategic weapons program. Financially, with impacts to mitigate the threats in the cyber domain. They will increasingly shape cyber operations with both cyber operators and defenders using these tools to improve their speed and effectiveness. For example, in August of 2025, cyber actors used an AI tool to conduct data extortion against international government, healthcare, and public health emergency service sectors and religious institutions. Shifting to the Arctic, the IC assesses that Russia and to a lesser extent China aim to strengthen their presence in the region through increased maritime trade, natural resource extraction, and military activity. Russia, which has the longest coastline in the Arctic, has long sought recognition of its quote-unquote polar great power status and is deploying more military forces and building new permanent infrastructure. China, though not an Arctic country, is engaged in more limited efforts in the region to advance its strategic and economic interests. On the technology front, artificial intelligence capabilities are rapidly advancing and changing the threat landscape. As this is a defining technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem solving, creativity, and autonomy, it'll be critical to ensure that humans remain in control of how AI is used and of the machines that may threaten to autonomously violate the interests of the American people across all domains. The IC assesses that China is the most capable competitor in this field and aims to displace the US as the global AI leader by 2030. AI adoption at scale across the spectrum of usage poses serious risks. AI has the potential to aid in weapons and systems design and has been used in recent conflicts to influence targeting and streamline decision-making, underscoring the risk and likely threats that could manifest on the battlefield. Early developers in quantum computers will give countries an extraordinary technological advantage over others to quickly process national security information and break current encryption methodology used to protect sensitive finance, healthcare, and government information. The global security landscape is volatile and complex, with armed conflict growing more common and posing potential threats against U.S. interests. The space domain is becoming increasingly contested, with China and Russia developing counter-space capabilities to challenge U.S. space efforts. The threat of nuclear proliferation and advancing chemical and biological warfare capabilities continues to grow. Turn now to the Western Hemisphere, where flagging economies, high crime rates, pervasive organized crime, migration flows, corruption, narcotics trafficking present a broad spectrum of risks to U.S. interests, and where strategic competitors seek to gain greater influence in the region. The IC assesses that Latin America and the Caribbean almost certainly will see hotspots of volatility in the coming year, with the potential to undermine or distract some countries from improving economies and living conditions and tackling illicit drug flows and cartels. The US-Mexico-Canada Agreement review in 2026 will likely increase uncertainty and on strategic position
on drill sites.
These factors are likely to constrain intelligence.
Several reports for political bias. ICA?
Yeah, so for the ICA, I understand that Director Gabbard is reviewing that, and I've deferred all.
I don't know what I'll when I grow up, but I do know who's helping me get there. Great teachers help us grow. Let's give them the support they need. Isn't it time we invest in schools again? Visit nomore.ca.
The situation in the region is extremely serious. It is causing great instability, suffering, and growing risks far beyond the region itself. And this is why we need de-escalation and maximum restraint, the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. And I want to say a word about our partners and friends in the Gulf and the broader region. We stand with them in solidarity and in friendship. The European Union is supporting them. And just this week, the Commission announced over 450 million euros in humanitarian assistance for the region.
Wir waren uns im Europäischen Rat einig, die Risiken einer weiteren Eskalation
in der Region sind erheblich. Die globalen Auswirkungen, auch bis in die Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika, sind gravierend. Deswegen wollen wir alle ein möglichst schnelles Ende der Kampfhandlungen. Was wir schließlich jetzt brauchen, ist der Einstieg in eine neue Friedensordnung für den Mittleren Osten. Zentrales Element muss dabei die Sicherheit des Staates Israel sein, aber ebenso die Sicherheit der Golfstaaten.
当前中东冲突还在升级，战事仍在扩大，不仅冲击地区的和平稳定，更直接影响国际能源、金融、贸易和航运，损害各国共同利益。历史和现实反复地告诉世人，武力不是解决问题的办法，兵戎相见只会增添新的仇恨。
CBS News is reporting. First of all, CNN had the similar report to Wall Street Journal. CNN reports that that Iran launched intermediate-range ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia at a joint U.S.-UK military base. And they said that that launch was Friday morning local time. Friday morning local time, according to CNN, that those missiles were launched. So they're the second outlet to report it.
or FX involves trading one currency for another. It's a big deal with a daily turnover of $7.5 trillion. Forex market.
That is a fearsome weapon, that 30mm cannon. With me now, Nathan Sales, former ambassador at large, board for counterterrorism under President Trump. Good to see you this Friday afternoon, Nathan.
Good to see you, John. Good to see those A-10s.
Yeah, I mean, they are a fearsome weapon. Some people call it an airplane built around a gun, which really functions that way. So let's talk about the Marines. We've got the USS Tripoli that's already headed there. The USS Boxer is going to be headed there as well with its amphibious ready group. The president's not tipping his hand, but there's a lot of talk about should the Marines land on Karg Island and literally take over Iran's ability to export oil, or should they land elsewhere along the coastline, maybe in Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, to...
As heavily as the US and Israel have battered Iran, the country's regime is capable of terror. Drones in their hundreds are being launched at bases across the Middle East as we speak. But an unexpected player has just entered the game. Ukraine is here to end Iran's terror, and it's teamed up with the US and Middle Eastern nations to do it. First Russia, now Iran. Ukraine has unleashed a futuristic weapon that will end the Iranian regime's drone scourge. What is that weapon? Interceptor drones. Ukraine has listened to calls from the US and Middle Eastern countries being affected by Iranian retaliation to Operation Epic Fury, and it's stepped up. Ukrainian interceptor drones are being sent to the Gulf region. They're being used to stop the Shaheeds that Iran is launching at its many enemies. Who's getting these drones? American bases in the Middle East, in Jordan, and maybe we will send also to Saudi Arabia, Zelensky has declared when discussing Ukraine's new agreement with the US. This is huge for Ukraine, and it could have a massive impact on the country as it continues its fight against Putin's brutal invasion of its territory. We'll explain why later in the video, as we first need to cover why Ukraine is sending these drones and how much of an impact they will have on Operation Epic Fury. Why is a simple question to answer. The US asked. During the opening hours of the operation, 6 US military personnel were killed. The weapon that killed them was likely a Shahed-type drone, Euronews reports, and the incident raised immediate alarm bells in the US command. These cheap drones don't compare to what the US brings to the table in terms of modernity or strength, but that's the problem. Shaheds are cheap, can be launched in huge numbers, and it only takes 1 or 2 to break through air defenses to cause a lot of damage. Every Shahed swarm that is launched forces the US to expend its far more expensive intercept missiles to stop them, and the approach doesn't always work. Has burned through 800 of its Patriot missiles in the first 3 days of Operation Epic Fury, which is a cost the US can't and shouldn't. So the question grew as the lens we received from the United States to support against it. I gave instructions to provide the necessary means and ensure the presence of Ukrainian specialists who provide security, he added, before offering a pointed reminder that Ukraine stands ready to help ensure the security of the partners that have helped it to defend itself against the Russian invasion of its territory. There's a reason for the last part of the message. Ukraine knows that its interceptor drones offer leverage, which is a topic we'll dig into soon, and there's more. Ukraine isn't only sending over interceptor drones to the US bases in the Middle East. The country knows all too well that expertise has to accompany the weapon, or it won't be as effective as the US and its allies need it to be. Along
Imagine being able to build anything.
the drones you can send to these partners how to get the most out of to X to explain, stating on March 17th, right now there are 201 Ukrainians in the Middle East and the Gulf region, and another 34 are ready to deploy. Those experts are already in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, Zelensky adds, and there are deals being formulated with other countries, in addition to the drone deal Zelensky says that Ukraine has with the US. Ukraine's expertise is in high demand right now. Anybody who's been paying attention to the Ukraine war will be able to tell you why. The drones that Iran is launching at US bases are the very same types of Shahed drones it has been supplying to Russia almost since the beginning of the Ukraine war. Iran started delivering these drones shortly after Putin launched his invasion, Le Monde points out. And it wasn't long before the country signed a lucrative licensing deal with Putin that allowed Russia to build Shahed type drones on its own territory. In the context, it knows these drones inside out, which means it understands the tactics used when the drone swarms are unleashed, and it has developed tactics along with weapons to minimize the damage that these swarms can cause. That's the expertise that the US and its Middle Eastern allies want. They're trying to get to grips with the type of fighting that Ukraine has both innovated and defended itself against for years, and Ukraine is in the perfect position to provide the knowledge they need to accelerate their ability to stop Iran's Shahed drones in their tracks. Of course, knowledge is all well and good, but Ukraine has to deliver the weapons to back the knowledge up, and it has the perfect solution in its cheap interceptor drones. Ukraine has already developed several models of interceptors which have proven themselves very effective against Shaheds, as we'll reveal in a moment. But chief among these interceptor drones, and the most likely to make its way into the Middle East, is the Sting. Described by the New Voice of Ukraine as an FPV interceptor, Sting already boasts a hit rate of between 80 and 90% when unleashed against Russia's Shahed-type drones. Ukraine started using this drone in 2025, and its specs reveal why it's a good counter to Iran's Shaheds. A Sting can fly at speeds of up to 315 kilometers or 195.7 miles per hour, meaning it's fast enough to adjust its position in mid-flight to intercept Shaheds that are pre-programmed to hit specific targets. Sting is a short-range solution, as highlighted by its 37-kilometer or almost 23-mile range and its 7-kilometer or 4.3-mile maximum altitude. And best of all, it carries a payload that weighs 500 grams or a little over 1 pound, which plays into the low cost involved in producing the interceptor. A Sting doesn't need a bigger payload. It's a small amount of explosive combined with the kinetic energy generated by a collision and the explosive packed into the incoming Shahed to take the Iranian drones out of the sky. We mentioned low cost a moment ago. That, more than anything else, is why the US and its Middle Eastern allies are clamoring to get their hands on Ukraine's interceptors. And to explain why, here's a little scenario. Iran launches yet more of its Shahed drones at an American base. Each of these drones costs Iran somewhere in the region of $20,000 to $50,000 to produce, which is a pittance in the context of traditional military spending. The US has to respond, and it does so by firing Patriot missiles to intercept the drones. Each of these missiles costs the US about $4 million to build. Let's say there are 5 of Iran's drones in the swarm, which is a relatively small number. The cost to Iran is no more than $250,000. The cost to the US, a staggering $20 million. Even if none of Iran's drones hit their targets, it forces the US to blow 80 times the amount of money it costs Iran to send the Shahids their way. That is an attritional tactic, and it's one that Iran can lean on to put pressure on the US. There are only so many Patriot missiles in the US stockpiles, and if Zelensky is correct, the US had already launched 800 of those missiles during the first 3 days of Operation Epic Fury. And America has already spent $3.2 billion on interceptor missiles, plus whatever it spent during the rest of its conflict with Iran. This isn't sustainable, even for the richest military in the world. The Sting interceptor solves all of these problems. The New Voice of Ukraine puts the cost of building Ukraine's drone interceptor at a measly $1,000. Reuters has it slightly higher, quoting a figure of around $2,000, which may be the Sting's export price. But either way...
Esmail Baghai, the US Defense Secretary has just said that they are winning this war and they'll keep winning. Are you now engaged in a military conflict you simply can't win?
We are defending ourselves. We are defending against this unprovoked, unwarranted act of aggression. So we have no other choice other than exercising our inherent right to self-defense. What they are doing is a criminal act of aggression, and I think it's very clear for everyone that they started this war in the middle of a negotiation process, in the middle of a diplomatic process on 28 February. And for the past 20 days, they have killed so many Iranians. They have attacked our civilian infrastructure. They have attacked residential areas. And now they are claiming that they are winning.
Yeah, but you're not just defending yourselves, though, are you? You're also attacking Qatar, one of your neighbors. Why attack them if your quarrel is with the US?
We are not attacking any country. We are exercising our right to self-defense.
You're attacking a gas facility in Qatar.
The reality is that the United States and Israel are abusing the soil, territories, and assets
you're not
scattered around us.
Okay, but you're not merely attacking US assets, you're also attacking a gas field in Qatar and other Gulf neighbors. I just want...
Who has started this war in the first place? And who has started attacking our gas field, South Pars field? It was Israel and Americans that attacked our gas field, our energy infrastructure in the first place. What we are doing is fighting back in accordance with our right of self-defense. As I said, we are not attacking any country. We are defending ourselves. Those military bases, those assets, those installations that are being used by Americans to conduct their military aggressions against Iran are legitimate targets under international law.
But a gas field is not a military asset, is it?
I'm telling you, yes, the gas field is shared by... We have made it clear that if Iran's infrastructure is attacked, we would have to retaliate in self-defense against any infrastructure that is shared by the United States. That's part of the war game they have imposed on Iran.
Right, we'll come back to why the US says they launched this war in the first place. But I wonder what you say to your former allies in the Gulf who are calling for you to stop the strikes on civilian infrastructure, stop the strikes on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. Will you listen to them? Oman, Qatar, these are countries that you've cooperated with in the recent past.
Sure. We do not feel any animosity or hostility toward the nations of the region. We common a lot with these countries. This is the result of American-Israeli aggression against Iran. Please do not forget that the military bases of the United States that are scattered around Iran are being used by the United Israel to conduct their military aggression against Iran.
But you say, sorry, I must just pick up on...
War.
I must just pick up on it. You say you've got no animosity to your Gulf neighbours. You're attacking Qatar's gas field. Abu Dhabi and Kuwait are under attack too, just in the last few hours. That is not an offensive act, is it? That's Iran lashing out.
No, it is not. As I said, we are only targeting those assets, those installations that partly or wholly belongs to the United States. They are attacking our infrastructure, and Iranian armed forces are very careful to attack those military bases, those assets that are used by the United States in any form or manner to conduct a military aggression against Iran.
A gas field is not a military asset, but we'll move on because we have lots of other issues to discuss. Let's talk about your own self-interest.
Was Iranian field a military objective? No,
I'm just taking issue with your description of Qatar's gas field as a military asset. But let's move on because we've got so much else to talk about. Let's talk about your own self-interest and how you're harming the Iranian economy with the paralysis of the Strait of Hormuz. Yes, it's damaging the global economy, but Iran's economy too. You depend on that. I wonder how soon you hope to get that strait opened again.
In peace, we didn't start. We do not to harm the security and stability of the region and of the Strait of Hormuz. This is the result of American-Israeli aggression against Iran. What else should we do? Do you expect Iran to let the warring parties, the aggressors' ships and vessels, to pass the Strait of Hormuz? Literally speaking, the Strait of Hormuz is not shut down. We have to exercise control over the shipping line because this strait is being abused by the United States and its allies to harm Iran's national interests. As you know, there have been many vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz.
There's a trickle of vessels passing through. So how soon would you like to see it properly reopened, and has it been mined?
As I said, we have to take these measures in order to make sure that this strait is not abused by the United States and its aggression partners against Iran.
Do those measures include mining the strait?
I'm not going to talk about military tactics of the Iranian armed forces. It is Iran's right under this war situation to take every measure necessary in order to counter the aggressors and in order to prevent them from using this strait for conducting their military aggression against Iran.
The paralysis of the Strait of Hormuz has wrought havoc around the world in terms of the economy and the supply of oil. The UK is reportedly considering deploying autonomous mine hunting drones to the region. The UK stayed out of the war so far, but if that were to happen in the Strait of Hormuz, would you consider UK assets legitimate targets?
Can you imagine that any country taking side actively with the aggressors and would be regarded as neutral? No. Any country, the international responsibility of states under international law requires that they try to avoid escalation, not to contribute to this aggression.
Well, the UK has stayed back in this war.
I think that's what any responsible nation must do, because UK and other Europeans know very well that this is an illegal war imposed on Iranians. It has no justification under international law. It is, strictly speaking, it is an act of aggression that is prohibited under the United Nations Charter.
Well,
so
you'll know that America,
rule of law, they have to hold the United States and Israel accountable for this act of aggression against Iran.
But you'll know that America says that you were just weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. You possess 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. That was the basis for the war here. Iran was a threat.
No, it's not. First, they said that there was an imminent threat from Iran. But themselves, the Pentagon, said there was no imminent threat from Iran. And please remember that in June, they themselves claimed that Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. And you know that Iran's nuclear program is absolutely peaceful. It has been certified many times by IAEA that Iran's nuclear program was safeguarded and was completely peaceful. So it is a big lie.
America doesn't believe that, and they've stated their evidence of the fact that Iran was weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. But let me just talk about what America has said since this last war broke out. The ballistic missile capacity has been functionally destroyed, they say. Likewise, your Navy, they've got aerial dominance, your drone manufacturing capacity has been decimated. How long can Iran keep fighting back?
We are defending our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, and our dignity against the aggressors.
How long can you carry on doing that?
They want to say, as long as it takes, because this is a matter of patriotism. Iranians are defending against an unjust war. Again, you refer to nuclear weapon. Let me respond. That's a big lie. You have to refer to the IAEA. If you agree that the International Atomic Energy Agency is the UN recognized watchdog, show me just one single piece of evidence that Iran's nuclear program is deviating from peaceful purposes.
Yeah, 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. That's not a lie, is it?
That's exactly what we were talking, ma'am. We were talking to take care of that and some other issues. I refer you to the mediator, Minister of Oman, Foreign Minister of Oman, who said there was significant progress in the negotiations. What happened? Just one day after the negotiations, and while we were supposed to meet in Vienna for technical discussions, they attacked Iran. And this was the second time in a matter of 9 months that they betrayed diplomacy. Please do not forget that we were negotiating, and everyone agreed that the negotiating was going well.
So are you open to talks with the US now?
How come? We were negotiating. We were negotiating when they decided to attack Iran for no reason. So do you think any nation which is right now under attack, whose leaders have been assassinated by terrorist actions, what do you expect from Iran to do?
Yeah, but
we are
you open?
Ourselves.
But clearly this war has to come to an end somehow. Are you open to talks to bring it to an end?
Talk to whom? Talk to those who do not believe in diplomacy? They have proven to everyone.
But what is the end game here? What is the end game? How does Iran end this war?
As I said, we didn't start this war, okay? We are defending ourselves. Look at what they are saying to their public, to the whole international community. They insist that they are going to continue their death and destruction on Iranian. They are saying proudly they do not believe in any rule of law. Right. They are saying that no mercy, no quarter, and this is war crimes. So do we have any other choice other than defending our territorial integrity and sovereignty against this barbaric act of aggression?
So you're content and you have the capacity to turn this into a forever war with America?
It is not Iran that has been fighting forever wars. This is the United States and Israel that have turned our region into a scene of everlasting wars. Look at what has been happening for the past 3 years. There has been a genocide in Gaza, attacks against Lebanon, against 7 countries. So Iran has been in the region for millennia. We do not welcome war. We didn't start this war. But we have to fight ferociously because this is an unjust war imposed against Iran.
Right, but you say you don't welcome this war. So how does this war end? Is it, for example, if you renounce your right to enrich uranium, is that a price worth paying to bring peace to the region and peace to your people?
As I said, it was not a matter of enrichment. It was not a matter of nuclear issue. We were talking together. Basically, they said that they obliterated Iran's nuclear program in June. So it means they have trying to find every excuse to further this whimsical war. They themselves do not know what is the purpose of this war other than being dragged by Israel into this war.
But I've asked you several times now how you envisage bringing an end to this war, helping to bring about peace, and you haven't been able to answer that question. So I can only conclude that you're really saying to America, this is a forever war if you decide it will be.
No, ma'am, you are simply misrepresenting what I'm saying. I'm telling you that while Iran is under constant attack, while Tehran is being bombed by the United States and Israel, we have to focus on defending our people against this barbaric act of aggression.
Right.
So you have to direct this question to those who started this war, not to a nation that is the victim of aggression.
Well, and many of your people are also the victims of Iranian aggression, but we'll come back to that in a second. There's been no sign of Mojtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader, the new supreme leader. Has he left the country? Is he in Moscow receiving medical treatment, as has been reported?
I'm so sorry that you are trapped by this propaganda. Iranian leaders are proud enough to stay in their home and fight. Look what happened to our supreme leader. He was assassinated when he was in his office. And I don't know what is the source of this propaganda, this psychological warfare that you are raising it as question.
So will you state as fact that the new supreme leader is alive and well and in Iran?
Of course.
You've seen him? You've spoken to him?
I'm not supposed to see him.
But no one has seen him, so it's really hard to believe what you're saying.
Okay, you can have your own judgment, but I said what I need to say.
So you're convinced that the new supreme leader is alive and well and in your country?
Sure.
Who's actually running the government of Iran? Because a lot of the leaders have been taken out by America.
What we have been witnessing has been a terrorist act, war crime, and I think the board has to really stop being indifferent toward these massive acts of war crime and crimes against humanity.
Well, there have been crimes against humanity committed by Iran too, haven't there? Not least against its own people. Tens of thousands of people.
You ask a question, again, it's a big lie, and I'm sorry that even the mainstream media is being duped by those who have propagated these lies. I was telling you that Iranian system is the outcome, is the result of a popular revolution, is a well-established system. It is not a one-rule ban that you can kill a number of people and you expect that the system collapse. This is based on the will of the people, ma'am.
But it's not a lie, is it, that thousands of your own people have been killed by your own military? And I wonder, Israel is asking the Iranian people to rise up and take control of their country. What are the consequences if they do that?
As I said, what happened in January was the result of the United States and Israel infiltrating in peaceful protesters, gunmen shooting down police forces and peaceful protesters. 3,000 innocent persons, 3,170 persons were killed. 2,400 of them were regarded as martyrs because they were either police officers or the protesters. So, and I think it's very clear to everyone that it was part of the United States and Israel plan to make Iran insecure.
It wasn't Israel and America, though, was it, killing the thousands of people who were protesting, who were calling for freedom? That wasn't Israel and America killing them.
It was peaceful protests turned violent by their interventionist propaganda. When the United States president called for more killing, he said, if there are more killings, he would intervene, ma'am. And that was a message given to those infiltrators more. So everyone knows it was part of their scheme to make Iran insecure. And I'm telling you, I wonder why don't you ask any question about 175 innocent kids that were killed in the first hours of United States-Israel attack against the city of Mina.
Well, so you know what? We've asked America and we will continue to ask about that. That's not a question for you. But just finally, I want to give you one more chance because people are suffering in your own country and across the world, and particularly in the region. How does Iran help to bring peace to the region? What concession might you offer to bring peace?
Again, I'm really surprised that you are directing this question to the representative of a country that is under attack. We didn't start this war. You have to
under
ask
attack and
question
also attacking.
No, we are not attacking. We are defending ourselves. We are defending ourselves against this barbaric act of aggression by two nuclear-armed regimes. Remember, they are both nuclear-armed. They are attacking another country with the excuse that is even unclear for themselves. First, they said imminent threat. Then they said we had to intervene because Israel was going to attack Iran and we had to preempt. So you have to direct this question to those who are the cause of this calamity for the whole region and for the international community.
Hello, I'm Ilhano. I want to take you now to Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making a televised address to update his country on the weekend front.
On Operation Roaring Lion. Under President Trump's visionary leadership, America and Israel are acting together in Iran with great determination and unprecedented strength. Operation Rising Lion is designed to remove the existential threats posed by the Ayatollah regime, the regime that has waged war against America and Israel and the people of Iran for 47 years. It chants death to America, death to Israel, and it delivers death to its own people. Our goals are three. One, removing the nuclear threat. Second, removing the ballistic missile threat, and removing both of these threats before they're buried deep underground and become immune from aerial attack. And third, this means creating the conditions for the Iranian people to grasp their freedom, to control their destiny. Today, the Ayatollah regime is not only attacking America, not only attacking Israel, not only attacking the Iranian people, it is attacking the entire Middle East and beyond. They've attacked civilians and American assets in Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman, and they've even attacked through their proxies Cyprus and Europe. We've warned for decades that their ballistic missile program would be used to attack these targets far and wide, and if they're not stopped, that's just the beginning. The death cult in Iran is trying to blackmail the world by closing a key international maritime route, the Straits of Hormuz. It won't work. Israel is helping in its own way, and intel and other means. The American effort.
Canada signing on to this pledge made with 6 other countries, which include all members of the G7, less the United States, but adds the Netherlands, who also signed on to this agreement. They're all pledging to help keep the Strait of Hormuz clear. Of course, this waterway is vital to world energy supply. About 20% of global oil passing through this narrow passage off the coast of Iran. It has been largely shut down since the war began, and that has pushed oil prices around the world up. Now, in this statement that Canada signed on to, the country said, "We call on Iran to cease immediately its threats, laying of mines, drone and missile attacks, and other attempts to block the strait to commercial shipping. We express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait." Well, what does that mean exactly? The communique doesn't really say, and how Canada and others could possibly contribute to this effort is unclear, to say the least. The government has repeatedly said it won't join the war in Iran militarily. That is, we're not going to send troops, we're not going to send airplanes, we're not going to send ships. So very likely this statement is kind of forward-looking to a period when the hot war ends and the missiles stop flying. So possibly there could be a role there for the Royal Canadian Navy in maybe escorting tankers through the strait, maybe doing some mine clearing operations. But just making the offer could help appease Donald Trump. He's very unhappy, as you mentioned, that his call out to other countries for help with Hormuz went pretty much unheeded. He's complained that the U.S. protects other NATO countries, but they don't help, he says, when the U.S. needs it. Of course, Canada responded to the U.S. call for
Mr. Larijani, thank you for doing this. We appreciate your time. So over the past 2 weeks, we've been traveling across Iran. We've been to the locations where scientists were assassinated. We've spoken to relatives of those killed. We've been to energy infrastructure sites that were hit. How would you describe the overall toll of the 12-day war on Iran?
حالا مقدار تلفات و اینا که قبلا اعلام شده حدود 1000 نفر از هموطنان ما به خاطر این جنگ که اسرائیل و امریکا با هم انجام دادن شهید شدن. منتها مشکل از مسئله اصلی این است که چرا این کار انجام شد؟ چون ما در حال مذاکره با آمریکا بودیم. چرا آمریکا باید این کار بکنه؟ امریکا یک کشور بزرگی است. چرا باید دستاویز رژیم صهیونیستی بشه؟ و این کار از نظر اخلاقا هم درست نبود که یک کشوری مثل آمریکا با ما قرار ملاقات میذاره در روز یک شنبه اما جمعه عملیات میکنه. این یک نوع فریبکاری بوده. به همین دلیل هم اعتماد به آمریکا در بین کشورها سست شده. اینا علالقاعده مسئلهشون مسئله هسته‌ای ایران نبود، چون موضوع هسته‌ای در حال مذاکره بود. تا اونجایی که من اطلاع دارم نتانیاهو تقریبا آقای ترامپ رو به یک فریب دچار کرد و او رو کشون به یک صحنه جنگ. نتانیاهو در روز دوم جنگ گفت ما میخوایم رژیم ایران رو از بین ببریم. چند بار این تکرار شد. البته ترامپ هم یک جایی فکر کنم روزای 5 و 6 این حرف رو زد. سوال اینه که آیا در این جنگ توفیق داشتن در این؟ حالا شما بخش‌های مختلف کشور رو رفتین دیدین. آیا نظام جمهوری اسلامی رو اینا با این جنگ از بین بردن؟ یا یک جنگی بود که به اون هدفی که میخواستن نرسیدن؟ اینا دنبال این بودن که مردم رو مقابل نظام جمهوری اسلامی قرار بدن. موفق نبودن. میخواستن آشوب ایجاد.
And so as we're talking about some of those top stories, you may have seen a headline talking about money in the Iran conflict come across your screen a bit earlier this week. And so putting this up from the Associated Press, it is now being reported that the Pentagon is seeking $200 billion in additional funds for the Iran war. And so, of course, we were listening into Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth as he confirmed that number just yesterday, that this supplemental request is expected, while emphasizing that the amount could possibly change as well. This comes as there's concern among lawmakers on both sides of the aisles, and of course, criticism over the cost of the war, which is currently in its 21st day with no clear end in sight. And to talk a lot more about what we are now seeing and where this could possibly go, I do want to now bring into the conversation Dave Lawler here with Axios. Dave, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me.
Well, there's a lot of conversation happening about that number, $200 billion, large number, and no other way you stop or discuss it. I have to ask you, as we're looking into what this means, have we heard from Secretary Hegseth at all about what these additional funds might be used for?
Yeah, so Secretary Hegseth said that the money would be used to not only replenish the weapons that have been expended by the United States so far in the war, but also to basically ensure that those stockpiles are even more filled than they were going into the war, so that we're ready and locked and loaded and ready to go into the future. Obviously, $200 billion is a whole lot of weaponry, particularly considering the Pentagon already spends $1 trillion a year. So this is a pretty eye-watering number. We've already seen a couple Republicans on Capitol Hill say that this sounds a little bit high to them. But of course, they said, we'll listen to Secretary Hegseth, what specifically he's asking for, because up to now, the spending on the war has been nowhere near $200 billion, at least according to the public reporting. So, of course, some people saw that number and said, does this mean this war is going to go on for a heck of a lot longer if they're going to spend $200 billion? Hegseth is saying that this is to ensure the long-term stability of our weapons stockpiles rather than because we're going to have a much wider war.
And of course, we'll continue to see how all of those implications come together. But you mentioned that public reporting on the numbers. Have we seen anything floated out there specifically by the Trump administration or others who might have some insight into what it stands at now?
Yeah, so the number that's out there right now is around $12 billion. That's a lot of money. It's not nothing, but it's certainly not $200 billion. A lot of that money has been on the ordnance, basically the not only the offensive weaponry that they fire, but the interceptors and things like that. So it's mostly airstrikes and missile defense, those kind of capabilities. And then, of course, they've moved a whole lot of ships and other assets into the region with big crews. That all costs money. So it's not a surprise that we're well into the billions of dollars 3 weeks into the war. The question, I guess, when you look at that $200 billion figure is, are we going to get up to the kinds of spending on this war that we saw with the wars that had a much larger footprint in previous decades, right? For now, this is a war that's being fought from the sea and from the air rather than on the ground. But of course, it's still, war is expensive, as we've learned as a country over the last, many years.
Absolutely. And we have this tweet from Fox News Politics, which lays it out, the message that Hegseth has, saying it takes money to kill bad guys, as the Pentagon is now seeking that additional funding. And so now I want to turn the conversation specifically from the Pentagon to there on Capitol Hill, taking at this live vantage point look at the U.S. Capitol building. And so we do know that the request on this scale is likely to face some pretty stiff opposition there from Democrats and Republicans, given the unpopularity or the popularity on some sides of this conflict that's ongoing. But I have to ask you, would this be a chance, as this is going to go in front of Congress, for them to make a formal statement in front of everyone on where they now stand on this conflict and how they feel about how our defense funds are being spent?
Absolutely. I think a lot of Democrats would love to have this vote, right, to be able to put their objections on the record and to vote down a $200 billion package. If that is indeed the numbers you mentioned, that may not be the final number, but that's where there's these negotiations with Congress. There will be some Democrats who won't want to vote against, money that will be used by troops overseas, and there will be some Republicans who are also in that squishy middle where this is not a very popular war. The polling shows that somewhere in the 40% range of Americans, or 30-something% range of Americans support the war, although most Republicans continue to support it. Something like 80% of Republicans support the war. Almost no Democrats and independents are mostly opposed. And again, these numbers can change over time, but that's the general picture. So if you're heading into a midterm election cycle and you're on the ballot, you might be a little bit uncomfortable voting for $200 billion for a war that a lot of Americans don't support. But, there's the flip side of not wanting to seem to oppose money for troops in harm's way, right?
Absolutely. And we're taking a live look there on the Senate floor at this time, as we've been hearing a lot of discussion And again, this goes further than just the politics of it all. Many Americans are also feeling the impact of this conflict on their own pockets when it comes to those gas prices. We've been talking a lot about the Strait of Hormuz and how Iran, with some of their tactics, have effectively blocked that strait at this point. It is affecting what we're saying about what can come in and out of the region. And so as I put up some of this video there on folks' screen, so they're able to see the impacts of the war, not only on the ground, but again, on some of those sites. What are we now watching in the region as Iran and Israel have continued to trade strikes on some of these key oil properties as well?
Yeah, so the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is the big puzzle for Trump to unpack. It would be very difficult for him to declare victory and go home if the Strait of Hormuz continues to be blocked, if the Gulf oil continues to be blocked, and Americans are paying higher and higher prices for gas, and also to heat their natural gas, et cetera, as well. I filled up my car today. It was the first time I'd paid over $4 a gallon for gas here in the DC area. So, I think Americans are starting to feel it more and more in their day-to-day lives. Every time they drive by a gas station, it's a reminder that there's a war in Iran that, is facing some real difficulties. And, for President Trump, his current mindset is we keep knocking out Iran's ability to strike ships in the Strait. So there's a lot of airstrikes happening on missile sites, Iran's Navy, launchers, etc., everything in and around that strait to try to help clear it up. And there's a real discussion happening now about whether it would be feasible to send in naval vessels and escort tankers through that strait to try to basically open it up for shipping by force rather than through negotiations. President Trump is quite frustrated with some allies who have not been willing to stick their hands up and say, yeah, we'll send our Navy in there and potentially take incoming fire from the Iranians in order to help free up the Strait of Hormuz. And then there's other potentially on the ground that are being discussed in the White House, and a lot of this has to do with that the Iranians have a chokehold on this strait right now, and something has to be done in order to remove that.
And Dave, we always knew that was a possibility going into this conflict. So many different analysts talked about that there in the region, how that's sort of the stronghold that Iran has as well. And so as we're talking
somewhere beneath the Strait of Hormuz, buried in silt on the sea floor, sits a steel cylinder roughly 3 feet long. No radar sees it. No satellite detects it. It emits no signal, generates no heat, makes no sound. It waits. Inside that cylinder, a hydrophone sensor listening for the acoustic.
In the last live stream, Sal Mercogliano and I discussed the fact the U.S. amphibious assault ship has been ordered to move from the Western Pacific to the Middle East to join forces involved in the war against Iran. The Tripoli, loaded with an air combat element of F-35Bs, V-22s, H-53s, and AH-1s, along with 2,500 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, is a force multiplier wherever it's deployed. But the question is, the ship has just passed through the Strait of Malacca near Singapore, is how it will be used by CENTCOM once it reaches the North Arabian Sea in about a week from now. Congressman Pete Sessions, who sits on the House Oversight Committee, was recently asked this by CNN's Kate Bolden.
The president is moving about 2,500 Marines to the region. Are you okay with putting those?
I actually spoke to some media last night, and I indicated that I believe that what these 2,500 Marines of the Marine Expeditionary Force would be to probably secure the island. The island is not, in my opinion, boots on the ground in combat circumstances.
It is a territory. It is Iran.
Facility. Well, I'm not going to argue that point. As a matter of fact, you're right. But what I would say is the president has chosen not to obliterate the ability that to get oil, and I think he wants to go secure that to make sure the Iranians don't do themselves in. So I think it's probably wisdom Is that boots on the ground? No, not like inside Iran where they're in the cities, to where we go through circumstances that we've had in the past of large areas of population, combatants against us, and it is a mess. I am against what I call the mess, moving people, Marines, snipers into population areas.
Let's review. Karg Island is located just 15 miles off the coast of Iran in the northern part of the Persian Gulf and hosts storage tanks and pumping facilities that account for 90% of Iran's oil exports. On President Trump's orders, last Saturday, CENTCOM struck military targets on the island. As the president explained in a subsequent Truth Social post, American jets did not drop on oil infrastructure, but would in the future if Iran did anything to, quote, interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, end quote. The problem with destroying Karg Island or any oil infrastructure, including the South Pars natural gas field that was recently hit by the Israelis, is that it affects global energy markets as much as it hurts Iran. Overnight, the price of oil passed $110 a barrel, and that means Americans will be paying more at the pumps and for airline flights as summer travel season approaches. Additionally, the increasingly desperate Iranian regime would likely react to an attack on the oil resources at Karg Island by threatening, if not executing, missile and drone attacks on shipping in the vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz, which would send other markets like fertilizer upwards, which would increase food prices. Average Americans may not have strong feelings about the war, but they definitely care about the price of food and gas, and that has political consequences. Therefore, the Trump administration cares. So this is where Congressman Sessions' idea of seizing Karg Island comes in. First, I understand the needle he's attempting to thread by saying an island off the coast of Iran is different than a full-up invasion of Iran, but let's be clear, it's still boots on the ground. And considering the assets currently in theater, those boots could likely belong to the Marines of the 31st MEU. The Marine Expeditionary Unit's strengths are rapid response, combined arms, amphibious lift, and helicopter/tilt rotor insertion. The MEU's constraints are it's not a theater-level invasion force. It has limited heavy sustainment, air defense suppression capability, intelligence, and long-range firepower compared to the full joint force. All of that is to say that the MEU can't go it alone. They'll need help ultimately from other parts of the Epic Fury effort. The tasking order to the 31st MEU for a seizure of Karg Island would include these mission objectives: deny adversaries use of the critical export terminal and associated infrastructure, protect freedom of navigation by securing a choke point to keep commerce moving, demonstrate U.S. resolve and capability to interdict a critical node, create leverage against our adversary by controlling a major export point, which further compresses their options. Reporting on current events is challenging because the situation is very fluid and chaotic at times. So let me tell you about a resource that I depend on as I attempt to provide an unbiased point of view: Ground News. I start my day by going to the Ground News homepage, and in this case, let's type a search related to the topic of the episode, Karg Island. Clicking on that gets us to this landing page that features a bulletized summary of the topic, curated using
Welcome back to Truth TV, ladies and gentlemen. We have some breaking news coming from the Islamic Republic of Iran. The United States and Pentagon are preparing for a ground invasion of Iran. The plans are coming into place. The IRGC and the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has now threatened the United Kingdom for helping the Americans and the Israelis. And we're going to give you guys the latest footage coming from the conflict, of course, in Iran and in the neighboring countries, including Israel. To cover, I'm going to get your reaction during the show as usual. But before we start, new news. And of course, to say this, we are going to of annual members. Obviously, it is now the year 25 of the Imperial Iran calendar, and you can use the promo code Nowruz, N-O. Of course, Lala being a little bit terroristy, let's just say. And there is this IRGC woman who's filmed herself being in the middle of all these explosions, and apparently she's now the victim, so she's praying to Allah and her other moms, Momo and Ali and all the others as well, to save her, apparently. Just don't be a terrorist. Watch this. Go home. Of course, la 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 la. Something about Muhammad. You said that already. You said that twice. Saint Fatima, help me. That's one of the Shia women. Something about Allah. What are you doing over there? Just go home. Absolute crazy people. I don't really care if the rest of your family and your friends are still members of Jerusalem's old city, right next to the Western Wall, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is obviously where the temple's supposed to be, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre as well, right next to it. Now, these are the holy areas for all religions. Basically, you got Christianity and Judaism and Muslims and everything else that we just saw today. 300 meters. Look at this.